There's a quiet paradox that lives in the space between what we admire and what we understand. We see people who seem unshakable, who carry themselves through chaos with a kind of calm that feels almost foreign, and we wonder what they possess that we don't. But here's what most people miss. Emotional strength isn't about never breaking. It's not about having thicker skin or feeling less. In fact, the most emotionally resilient people often feel more deeply than others. They've simply learned to metabolize their emotions differently, to transform pain into something that doesn't poison them. The question isn't whether you feel fear, sadness, or uncertainty. The question is what you do in the moment after those feelings arrive. Do you notice how some people seem to recover from setbacks faster? Not because they're unaffected, but because they've trained themselves to process difficulty in a way that doesn't leave them stuck. That's not luck, that's skill. And like any skill, it's built through specific, repeated habits that most people never consciously develop. Psychologists who study resilience have identified something fascinating. Emotional strength correlates strongly with what's called affect labeling, the ability to accurately name and describe your internal states. When you can say, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm worried about disappointing people, rather than just, I feel bad, you activate different neural pathways. Research from UCLA shows that putting feelings into words reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, and increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for regulation and perspective. Emotionally strong people have developed this habit almost automatically. They don't run from their feelings or drown in them. They observe them with the curiosity of a scientist examining data. This creates psychological distance, what therapists call cognitive diffusion, where you experience emotions without becoming them. You're not an anxious person. You're a person experiencing anxiety right now. That distinction changes everything. But there's another layer that often goes unnoticed. Emotionally resilient individuals have what attachment researchers call earned security. Many of them didn't start life with secure attachments or ideal circumstances. What they developed instead was the capacity for self-reflection and narrative coherence. They can tell the story of their struggles without either minimizing the pain or becoming defined by it. This connects to James Pennebaker's research on expressive writing, which demonstrates that people who process difficult experiences by writing about them, particularly focusing on both the facts and their feelings, show improved immune function, better psychological health, and greater emotional regulation. The act of organizing chaos into narrative creates meaning, and meaning creates resilience. Emotionally strong people are often people who've learned to be the author of their own story rather than just a character swept along by the plot. There's also something subtle about how these individuals approach failure and self-criticism. Carol Dweck's work on mindset reveals that people with emotional resilience tend to hold what she calls a growth mindset. But it goes deeper than just believing you can improve. It's about how you talk to yourself when you stumble. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion shows that emotionally strong people treat themselves with the same kindness they'd offer a struggling friend. They don't confuse self-compassion with self-indulgence or weakness. They understand that beating yourself up doesn't make you stronger, it just makes you tired. When they make mistakes, they ask, what can I learn? Instead of, what's wrong with me? This shift from fixed self-judgment to curious self-examination is transformative. It allows them to extract wisdom from pain without letting pain define their identity. And perhaps most importantly, emotionally strong people have learned the art of selective vulnerability. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability and shame shows that these individuals don't share everything with everyone, but they do share authentically with people who've earned the right to hear their story. They understand that isolation amplifies suffering, but so does oversharing with unsafe people. They've cultivated relationships where emotional honesty is possible, and they protect those connections fiercely. They also practice what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between similar emotions with precision. Instead of just feeling bad, they can identify whether they're feeling disappointed, ashamed, anxious, or lonely. This specificity matters because different emotions require different responses. You don't solve loneliness the same way you solve shame. The more precisely you can identify what you're feeling, the more effectively you can address it. What ties all these habits together is something deeper. A fundamental belief that emotions are information, not verdicts. Emotionally strong people have learned to treat their feelings as signals worth listening to, rather than threats to be eliminated, or truths to be obeyed without question. They've developed what Daniel Goleman calls emotional intelligence, the capacity to recognize, understand, and manage emotions in yourself and others. But beyond that, they've cultivated emotional courage, the willingness to feel difficult things without immediately reaching for distraction or numbing. So when you look at someone who seems emotionally unshakable, remember this. You're not seeing someone who doesn't struggle. You're seeing someone who's learned to struggle differently, someone who's practiced naming their pain, writing their story, treating themselves with compassion, and building connections that can hold their truth. These aren't genetic gifts, they're skills, built quietly over time, often forged in the very fires that could have destroyed them. And that means they're available to you too, if you're willing to practice them